The urgency and the positivity, particularly the positivity around the debate, has been missing. It's been very negative. Understandably, it's such a large issue that everyone feels completely overwhelmed.
On January 29th, 2026, Westminster's Great Oak doors opened as lawmakers assembled for what would turn out to be one of the most contentious sessions in contemporary British history. Thousands of miles away in Montecito, Prince William, the Prince of Wales and future king, stood in front of them with such gravity that the room became silent as he prepared to make an announcement that would shock the entire world and bring a former actress turned duchess to tears. How did a 2018 fairy tale wedding degenerate into a constitutional problem that necessitated the involvement of Parliament? Insiders said that the solution was discovered in a series of actions so blatant and cunning that they endangered the monarchy's own existence, an untold tale of institutional betrayal, royal ambition, and the moment the crown finally had enough. According to people familiar with the proceedings, Parliament took the unprecedented step of voting to revoke Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's royal titles, so reverting them to ordinary citizen status, an action that is virtually unheard of in contemporary Britain. The world initially saw the couple's withdrawal from royal duties in January 2020 as a personal decision motivated by their desire for freedom and independence. But as time went on, a more concerning image became apparent. From withdrawal agreements intended to cut formal links to HRH titles reappearing in private invites, diplomatic documents, and merchandising campaigns, their persistent use of royal styling, diplomatic associations, and commercial influence blurred the boundaries between private life and crown representation. Not only did these acts go against tradition, but they also rekindled a constitutional discussion about what it means to be a royal in the 21st century, posing difficult questions Buckingham Palace had been debating for years. Can you claim independence while abusing institutional symbols for personal gain and reject responsibility while clinging to privilege? On January 29th, 2026, resumed discussions apparently centered on proposed laws, such as the Removal of Titles Bill, which would give the monarch or a parliamentary committee the authority to remove titles from non-working royals. As a result, such issues sought replies. Although Harry and Meghan had agreed in 2020 not to use HRH styling in official or commercial contexts, and technically kept the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles bestowed by Queen Elizabeth II in 2018, reports through 2025 indicated that they occasionally used HRH styling informally in private settings, details that ultimately contributed to the crisis reaching a breaking point. Consider the insolence of publicly approving one thing while discreetly carrying out another behind closed doors. When Meghan Markle allegedly used HRH styling in private written correspondence, those simmering tensions finally erupted. According to palace insiders, this move may not have technically violated the exit agreement, but it clearly betrayed its spirit, and in a constitutional monarchy, spirit is just as important as law. The foundation of the system is made up of unwritten norms like honor, trust, and honoring your word when no one else is looking. These principles were crumbling. Prince William was already making calculating moves behind the scenes, seeing his brother's departure as an institutional threat that needed to be strategically corrected rather than through the prism of passion. By late 2025, observers speculated that William intended to remove princely and HRH styles from all non-working royals after he became king, including Harry, Meghan, and possibly their offspring, realizing what they appeared to have forgotten. Royal titles are duties, not embellishments. He saw how royal connections were used to secure contracts with Netflix, Spotify, and international speaking engagements, leaving the public perplexed about the boundaries between official duty and celebrity branding. William was aware that public opinion would be crucial, but no such legal process had yet been utilized against the Sussexes, unlike Prince Andrew, whose titles were formally revoked by King Charles III in 2025. According to a YouGov survey conducted in January 2026, 61% of participants were in favor of depriving Harry and Meghan of all royal titles if they persisted in their private lives. This is essentially a mandate. The foundation of the Brexit Accord, which Queen Elizabeth II personally mediated in 2020, was trust. No official responsibilities, no public funds, and no use of HRH in formal or commercial settings, but officially keeping titles in name only. It was always about honor, not legality, and that honor gradually diminished. By 2023, Archewell had expanded into a vast company whose branding frequently conflated private individuals with royal representatives, as seen by invites, introductions, and other materials that still alluded to royal position. The turning point occurred in 2025, when correspondence related to Nigeria exposed the use of HRH in private documents. Travel was handled through diplomatic channels under the presumption that Meghan was still a working royal, giving her privileges that would never be granted to private individuals. Princess Anne's October 2025 declaration cut through the clutter. There could be no middle ground between public service and personal gain. This was about principle, not routine. Following that, an internal investigation looked into engagements, visas, and charitable donations, and found cases where royal titles seemed to affect diplomatic treatment, invites, and regulatory filings. Princess Anne made a clear statement by December, saying in public that nobody had the right to mislead the British people about who was speaking for the throne. The institution listens and takes action when someone with her record of silent service speaks. At the same time, Prince William urged King Charles to draft the framework and sought advice from constitutional experts regarding letters patent in order to finally define and limit the use of HRH. Then, on January 23, 2026, Princess Anne and Prince William signed an extraordinary joint statement issued by Buckingham Palace that was measured, clear, and signalled the end of the ambiguity era. The combined signature alone conveyed a clear and unmistakable message. This was institutional survival, not personal grievance. Senior royals outside the current monarch publicly addressed a betrayal of trust within the family for the first time in 2 generations, and the statement quickly established its tone. Princess Anne and Prince William said they deeply regret what they called a long-standing pattern of deception by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in their use of royal associations, titles, and privileges, especially through the Archewell Foundation and recent international engagements. They also said they have a responsibility to maintain both tradition and moral clarity. A formal request was made to King Charles III to start a title review under letters patent and current royal statutes. Official royal charitable work would be consolidated under a new Crown Service Foundation chaired by Princess Catherine and Princess, and Archewell would no longer be recognised as a royal-endorsed charity. Harry and Meghan were prohibited from representing or speaking on behalf of any Commonwealth-linked initiatives, and regulators in the US and the UK were advised to audit Archewell's disclosures, foreign donations, and use of HR styling. The effect was instantaneous. While the public's response erupted in support, with hashtags trending, veterans organizations supporting the palace, and petitions calling for full title revocation, garnering hundreds of thousands of signatures, royal historians presented the move as a necessary warning against confusion and misuse of royal capital in a media-saturated age, rather than an attack. The Sussex response was one of silence, broken only by subtly changing Archewell's website to remove all mention of Commonwealth backing and royal family affiliation, without offering an explanation or an apology. Consequences swiftly accumulated behind the scenes. PR firms distanced themselves, streaming partners reassessed contracts, podcast releases were postponed, and legal experts cautioned that increased regulatory scrutiny might fast undermine donor faith. King Charles III, who had already approved the statement and let the following generation to speak with institutional authority, stayed conspicuously silent, but clearly in agreement throughout it all. As internal sessions at Clarence House and Windsor Castle centred on a more comprehensive reckoning, how the monarchy might endure in an age of personal branding and digital ambiguity, his delayed and never rescheduled call with Prince Harry spoke louder than words. The unravelling of the Nigeria trip, which was first presented as a humanitarian trip, but turned out to involve diplomatic-level visas issued under the pretext of formal royal representation, made that reckoning even more acute. Citing Crown-adjacent phrasing intended to conflate private activism with state power, immigration officers verified that those visas were backed by a letter on royal letterhead that was purportedly issued by an Archewell executive, but was not signed by any high-ranking government official. Officials investigating the case saw this as deliberate deception rather than confusion, proof that royal status had been used where it no longer belonged, and the point at which the well-built facade finally started to crumble. Weaponized to gain access to privileges intended only for sovereign diplomacy, the aftermath compelled a bold countermove. On January 29, 2026, Princess Catherine and Princess Anne jointly chaired the quiet establishment of the Crown Service Foundation. The choice of leadership Catherine, who is respected for her poise and unwavering work ethic, and Anne, who is the epitome of duty without spectacle, and the consolidation of royal philanthropic endeavours were not coincidental. The Foundation's mission pillars, which focused on children's welfare and education, veteran mental health, sustainable development and climate resilience, and Commonwealth solidarity under a governance model that left no room for doubt, purposefully mirrored and corrected the areas Archewell had claimed as its own. Every effort would be subject to independent monitoring boards, yearly audits, and a stringent prohibition on using HR styling or personal titles in external branding. According to reports, Catherine stated during the private event, "We are not content creators." The people overwhelmingly supported the palace's position, with Catherine emerging as the most trusted royal voice in public charity. "We are public servants." Archewell's demise became evident when the Crown Service Foundation gained traction. Meghan's team failed to rekindle interest through a proposed streaming series, which was rejected amid what one agent described as unmistakable brand fatigue. Major sponsors withdrew, and Harry's requests for a formal visit with King Charles went unfulfilled. After a confidential dossier from the royal household's legal counsel prompted the Charity Commission for England and Wales and the IRS to conduct a joint regulatory assessment of Archewell, in a historic first, the situation worsened. Internal memos referring to HRH Meghan's royal tour Africa, emails billing Archewell-funded travel as royal engagements in visa paperwork, and a fundraising strategy that specifically suggested taking advantage of residual royal brand value to position Archewell as the heir to Diana's humanitarian legacy were among the damning materials. Princess Catherine responded bluntly when told on that language. "Behaviour, not branding, is what carries a legacy." A private home document signed by Princess and Prince Edward, which suggested suspending the Sussex titles pending the audit's conclusion, and warned that permitting title holders to trade on royal trust while disobeying royal duty would undermine the kingdom from within, contributed to the problem. At first, Harry reacted angrily, claiming in private that the organisation was attempting to remove them. However, as the memo became public, his stance changed to one of retreat. Media appearances were cancelled, attorneys asked for private mediation with the Privy Council, and pressure increased from US advisors, who cautioned that further royal involvement could result in Archewell losing its charitable status completely. Meghan, on the other hand, fell silent and stopped speaking in public as her own advisors subtly admitted an unsettling reality. The royal link had been the key advantage, and without it, there was nothing left but a well-known and increasingly questioned story. Harry was forced to make a hasty retreat due to growing legal and financial danger, suggesting to his advisor that he might even think about willingly giving up his title in exchange for a negotiated split, a remarkable reversal for a prince who had previously appeared certain that he had escaped the throne on his own terms. Did in return for a firm and unambiguous boundary between Archewell and the monarchy? Take a moment to consider the word voluntary relinquishment. A man who was born a prince, served in Afghanistan, walked behind his mother's coffin in front of the world, and is now considering giving up his title in order to save a humanitarian foundation that is being looked into. How did this happen? How did the once-loved Spare, who was praised for both his military service and his mother's warmth, become so vulnerable and in need? Meghan Markle, who had previously been the most powerful advocate behind Archewell's vision, became noticeably quiet as the pressure increased. Insiders acknowledged that she was re-evaluating forward-facing roles, which is a polite way of saying she was waiting out the storm, and her Instagram went black after January 29th, an eternity in influencer time. Patience was short in Hollywood. Unwilling to take on legal and reputational risk, production partners connected to Netflix and Spotify quietly put a stop to projects. One agency told them the plain truth. The royal connection had been the key asset, and without it, only a well-worn personal narrative remained. Then the world's long-awaited moment arrived. Following a thorough independent audit and cross-border assessment, Buckingham Palace issued an official statement of record stating that the titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex, as well as all associated royal style and affiliations, were suspended permanently. Harry and Meghan were prohibited from using HRH, Sussex branding, or any associated symbols, as well as from posing as royal representatives, with immediate effect. The audit report that came with it was terrible. It verified that donor funds had been misrepresented through undisclosed consulting fees connected to Meghan's personal brand advisors, that foreign travels claimed to be humanitarian missions were actually sponsored content negotiations, and that the distinction between personal enrichment and charity had been purposefully blurred. The US Internal Revenue Code's Section 4958, which governs private investment, was found to have been violated. As a result, the IRS froze Archewell's accounts, and the UK Charity Commission took action to completely deregister Archewell UK. The organisation that was supposed to represent the Sussexes' post-royal legacy was essentially shut down in a matter of hours. Palace sources stated that King Charles III signed the ruling and gave it full authority, even though he stayed mute in public. The decision was interpreted as a precedent rather than a punishment. In private, the monarch is reported to have summed it up with quiet sadness. They could have earned what they borrowed, but they chose shortcuts, and that was not the Windsor way. Insiders maintain that the door had never been completely closed, but serving others requires humility, selflessness, and putting the institution before oneself, qualities that Harry and Meghan ultimately failed to adopt. Together, Princess Anne and Princess Catherine unveiled a new crown project in Windsor Guildhall that would reshape royal service in the future. More than just a reaction to Harry and Meghan, the Royal Humanitarian Charter of 2026 represented a radical rethinking of how the monarchy would operate in the contemporary era. In order to ensure that there would never again be uncertainty about who speaks for the monarch, the Charter established stringent criteria on royal representation and established the Monarch Service Alliance, a global system intended to coordinate, monitor, and audit lawful royal interactions in real time. Princess Anne outlined the guiding principle of this new era in her speech, saying that public trust is earned through consistent action rather than by name or marriage. Princess Catherine, on the other hand, added remarks that were generally regarded as pointed and deliberate, stressing that the Charter was about integrity rather than exclusion, and a pledge that serving vulnerable communities would never again be used as a means of achieving personal fame. Thousands of people gathered in front of the palace to show their overwhelming support, affirming not only specific people, but also the ideals they believed the monarchy should uphold. Social media erupted as royal integrity gained popularity in dozens of countries around the world, and the business community quickly delivered its own verdict. US immigration authorities acknowledged a re-evaluation of Harry's residency status due to financial and tax issues associated with Archewell. Spotify confirmed the Archetypes brand had returned to the platform, and Netflix officially terminated development projects associated with Meghan Markle. The withdrawal of any residual royal brand plan was signalled by Meghan's legal team's withdrawal of a pending Archewell Royal trademark application. Meanwhile, sources characterised Harry as uncertain and adrift, and Meghan as feeling more and more alone and devastated. Neighbours in Montecito noticed an unsettling silence, as though the pair had disappeared overnight. The royal family's goal was to safeguard a centuries-old service-based tradition from contemporary distortion, not to exact revenge. In her concluding remarks, Princess Anne succinctly summed it up by saying that monarchy should be characterised by service done rather than fiction sold, and by responsibility fulfilled rather than titles asserted. As a result, the chapter concluded with a clean, irreversible severance rather than a public altercation. The crown was strengthened by its resolve to uphold its values, and a new age of responsible royal service began to take shape. However, the human cost persisted. Meghan, who was previously praised on magazine covers and thought she could change the monarchy itself, was reportedly left in tears and silence as the institution continued on without her. Perhaps recognizing too late that he had already lost both worlds, Harry had to make the impossible decision to choose between family and marriage, heritage and reinvention, and legacy and commerce. One thing is certain, though. January 29th, 2026, will go down in history as the day the monarchy drew a line in the sand, the day the Crown said enough, and the day Prince William stood before Parliament to signal the end of Harry and Meghan's royal story. This moment turned a modern fairy tale into a constitutional reckoning, and ushered in what could turn out to be the most dramatic chapter in modern royal history.